In this episode of The Bear Roars, Dan sits down with Greg Keller, CTO and co-founder of JumpCloud and an Endeavor, Colorado board member and entrepreneur. Greg's path to tech was unexpected. He planned for a career in the CIA, but after graduating to a tough economy, he pivoted into software. His journey took him around the world before landing in Boulder, where a chance meeting with Brad Feld led him to Techstars, Endeavor, and the startup ecosystem. He shares how failure shaped his approach to building companies, why he co-founded JumpCloud to solve major security challenge, and the role mentorship and resilience play in entrepreneurship. Endeavor, Colorado is a part of Endeavor Global, supporting 2,500 high-impact entrepreneurs across 45 markets worldwide. Let's poke the bear to kick off the conversation.
Greg, this is going to be really interesting because I'm going to learn so much about you. And although we've known each other for a while now, right, I feel like we've just scratched the surface of getting to know each other. In about an hour and a half, I'm going to have known you a lot deeper than I have in the past.
And now I'm under pressure.
Yes.
I've said, especially living in Boulder, I live in Boulder. If we apply some math to this, I think there's less than a half a degree of separation of the people in this town that do things and get things done. So it's our first real opportunity to kind of really explore each other.
Yeah. And one thing I'd like to say in Boulder is really interesting people kind of hide in plain sight. Boulder, only about 100,000 people live in Boulder, not including the college kids. Yet a week doesn't go by where I am introduced to someone or I just learn about someone who maybe has been here for a while, maybe is a new person, but they've done just really interesting things in their life.
True.
Often with tech businesses, entrepreneur businesses, but also in culture and other aspects of life. I mean, that's one of the reasons I will always call Boulder my home.
100%. We're Bay Area transplants probably before the big influx happened, especially around COVID. This was 22 years ago or so.
Okay.
And there was a definite purpose of why we moved here. And it was because Boulder, it was, living the life in San Francisco was beautiful, especially at that time. So you're talking about the sort of explosion of the internet, the proper internet, the one that we know today, right? And my wife and I had, at the time, babies born at CPMC in downtown San Francisco. And we're here in this moment. I just helped take a company public. And we literally said to ourselves, is this the edge of our universe? Like, is this it?
Well, certainly people in Silicon Valley thought
that is
the rest of us were outside the edge of their universe.
100%.
A lot less so today.
Yeah. Right. And much due respect to my friends in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
But we just made the call. My wife had never seen Boulder, sight unseen.
And Boulder was just really getting going at that point as a recognized tech scene. I mean, that's right before Techstars started.
That's right.
It's right before we started to hear about Brad Feld and he transitioned from Mobius to the Foundry Group. So that was really in the formative stage of kind of Boulder emerging as, a venture startup community.
And there were green sprouts. You could see it clearly. Our region has a long heritage in tech, but more traditional tech. So, and telecom, as you obviously very well know. And I think, the green sprouts of what we now know as modern technology, startups, those kinds of things. Yeah, for sure. The inertia started with, Brad, a number of other really, this is like back in the day of Todd Vernon, guy I worked with in the past, and others. And you could, when I moved into town, I sought those people out.
What's Todd doing now?
That's a good question. I know he's helping his daughter's venture in sort of the medical device world. Post his acquisition of Victor Ops, he went in pursuit of helping his daughter and some other things. So,
gotcha. So how did you end up in Silicon Valley? Let's go back there before we come to being out here.
This is a long but interesting story, but it was a formative one, but I will keep it crisp. So,
we got plenty of time, so you don't have to keep it too crisp.
This is awesome. Imagine the world in 1992. I graduated from Syracuse University, and I graduated in the farthest reaches away from tech that you could imagine. So I studied foreign diplomacy, languages, and I was heavily influenced by my brother, who's a career military guy. He just retired fairly recently as a 2-star general, special intelligence, special operations, all that stuff. And he was super formative with me. Like learn languages. This is how you could do service for the country. So I was set on taking the foreign service exam, and I wanted to be kind of spooky. Like that was very intriguing to me, and doing service in that way for the country. So fast forward, here I am, freshly minted, graduate, all the accolades, and we are in an economy that is far worse than from my memory, my aging memory, than it is now.
And what
this is 92, 93?
Yeah.
So there are layoffs. People are not hiring. Everything you can imagine was going wrong.
Except
right?
for the build out of the fiber networks. That
exactly.
was boom days.
There you go. I should have been studying that. So through a random sequence of events, the government wasn't hiring. My sister, who's in this obscure field called software sales, was able to get me into a company. And this, not only was it just software, it was in the most obscure niche of software. It was if you were familiar, or your viewers are familiar, in the world of data modeling and data architecture.
All right. Can I pause you for a second?
Yeah.
I want you to go back to your first aspiration about being kind of in the spooky business.
Yeah.
In the CIA, FBI. Tell me what was going on inside of you that made you want to go down that route. That sounds important.
And it felt important. And no one has ever asked me that question. And here's the truth. Definitely a patriot, love my country. But I think my skills then, and I think I still harbor this now, if I can get in your brain, I can pull you with me. I know that sounds obscure, almost egotistical, but it's important for me to leverage that skill for good. And pulling people towards my objective was something, my brother and others really saw in me. And I don't use the word manipulation, but if I could apply those skills and help my country in ways that I thought were admirable, I was going to do that. Like that was it. And being able to, I read all the spy novels, every single one you could imagine. And I didn't know what that would really translate to. Would I, be in a sports car, with a scarf and, a handgun? No, I didn't expect that. But solving really hard problems, people problems that needed to be convinced to do something that we need as a nation state needed them to do, I felt I could do that.
Yeah. Could you, that was a long time ago when the internet was barely existing, right? And now in the day and age we live in now, the ability to use kind of the internet, use artificial intelligence,
right,
to influence nation states is so advanced.
It's
and
scary.
Still just beginning.
Right.
Yes, it's scary. It's powerful. It's transformational. It's hard to tell where it's happening, when it's happening. Even we could be getting sucked into it and not realize it. My eyes are more open now than they would have been even a year ago after just trying to get a sense of some of the stuff that maybe it's been happening inside our federal government. It's like, okay, that's pretty crazy.
Yep.
I'm listening to a book now. I'm going to botch the guy's name, but it's the guy who wrote Homo Sapiens. And this book is all around kind of information, but it's kind of the history of information dating back eons, but working its way just like Homo Sapiens and Homo Duo, I think it's pronounced.
Right.
It then started, I got to part of the book where it's starting to transition to where information is headed with AI and otherwise. It's just
fascinating.
Crazy. You should definitely listen to that book.
I'm in it. I'm on it. So that was sort of the background. And fast forward.
Any regrets that you didn't go down that path? Or do you think you made the right choice?
I think
obviously you've done really well.
I think I made the right choice. I love my country, all those things. But I can't believe the series of events that I found this world, this the deep world of software, this New York City thing. I was woefully underqualified. I lied my way into this job.
Mm-hmm.
I used
embellished.
I got them to believe in me, and
you sold your way.
I did. But I then became obsessed over data modeling, data architecture. I could see it. I understood the patterns. It's like languages. It's literally abstraction like languages. When you understand a framework, you can use that framework, and modeling for data is the same way. Fast forward, so I'm in New York City. The gravest mistake they ever made was
roughly what year are we in right now?
93, 94.
So, okay, 1994, tough job cycle. You just started to be introduced to software sales, it sounds like. First.
And very quickly, they handed me this huge laptop. Imagine a laptop of the day. It literally was. It was this huge behemoth. And then my job morphed into what we now know as pre-sales engineers. So you sit with the client, and so imagine these are hardcore data architects, gray beard, very, almost all have backgrounds in mathematics. And, I'm walking them through the solution, and it changed my life. Like the way what was going on was listening as much as talking. But the listening component, I would just immediately shuttle back to this cramped little office in Park Place in New York City and spoke with our engineers. And they didn't understand how what they were building wasn't winning. And guess what that became? Product management.
Yeah.
And that changed my life. Like that I didn't even know that was a thing, right? But being able to crawl into the depths of, understanding and empathizing with the client or the customer, as much as turning and empathizing with your engineering team and everybody else, all your constituents. They're all different, but you need to harmonize them in order for them to get done what you need done, which is solving a problem for the customer. Then ended up...
Yeah, sales engineers and solution engineers were very important,
especially
in my business. And, so I totally get what you're saying. Every really strong account exec wanted a very strong sales engineer. And they wanted a one-to-one relationship. Usually it'd be 2 or 3 to 1, but they wanted kind of the engineer along their side to help them work with the customer and, understand the customer's problems, and then, help put together solutions for 100%. Those customers.
And those ratios still are desired today by great salespeople.
Salespeople didn't like sharing their commission checks at all, but they certainly wanted the people alongside them.
Of course, make them look good. So all that, Dan, their quote grave mistake was giving me this laptop, getting me on airplanes and going around the world as a young man.
So you said going around the world in that time frame.
You name it.
Really?
Quite literally name it. Wherever there was data architecture happening, I was probably in that meeting or in an office somewhere, from Japan to Europe. I went to Brazil a number of times.
Wow.
The thing about Brazil, we have to remember that it is a massive financial backbone for LATAM. It still remains that way to this day. And in fact, still has some of the oldest IBM OS 390 and AS 400 instances. Where the rest of the world has evolved, they've somehow been able to keep that infrastructure alive and running, which blows my mind. So that was like sort of the background. Ended up doing a conference in San Francisco.
And what was the company? The company's name?
We were acquired by IBM. It was a company called Popkin Software and Systems. Popkin. Yeah, the eponymous with Jan Popkin, the founder.
Okay,
who is a major luminary in this world of modeling and data architecture. So yeah, that was it. And there was a moment where I'm in San Francisco, and this is at a conference, probably 1995, where I'm doing my thing, and this dude is in the background. He's sort of frumpy facing me, and I'm like, he's kind of, give
for
me
those who are just listening.
Yes, give me the squinty.
Greg's kind of got his crossed arms high up on his body,
sort of give me the
a little bit of a
stink
step back. So,
and I go and meet him after. I give my shtick, and it turns out it's going to be the man who changes my life. His name is Stephen Wong, multi-time entrepreneur, and he basically said, in so many words, "Why don't you come work with me?"
Why did he looking at you the way he was looking at you? What was?
Yeah, I couldn't figure it out. I think he was really trying
to
read me, and and I picked up on it right away. But it was one of those moments where how do you react to that when this person is basically drops a bombshell on you. Come work with me. Let's go build this thing I'm trying to get off the ground. And you react. And I reacted and was like, maybe it was the world's greatest Jedi mind trick. I don't know. But I said yes. And within a few weeks, I was on a plane and all my worldly possessions, which amounted to like a baseball cap, my mountain bikes, and one suitcase. And I was in San Francisco working in what is called a startup. And that changed my life in all the ways.
And what was there at that startup when you got there?
There was very little infrastructure, about 10 people. And the company was called Embarcadero Technologies, namesake. It was founded on the Embarcadero.
Yep.
And we were in the similar spaces what I was doing in New York City. So data modeling, data architecture. And
what was it about you that caught, would you say his name was?
Stephen Wong.
Stephen's attention. Like why did you jump out to him?
It's hard to say. I've never really debriefed, like, what'd you see in me, dude? I suspect he just saw someone who really deeply gave a shit about this obscure part of the software development lifecycle. And, I ended up spending, with Popkin and Embarcadero, probably the better half of 14 years, what I call the first bookend of my career, and really becoming expert in the space.
And maybe help the people listening.
Sure.
Bring to life like what you were doing in those years. Like what was the data modeling all about? And
so really what it was, so think of it, became less the exercise of data modeling and me for the first time building a product that did the data modeling. So visual, if people are familiar back in the day, software engineers often would visually model their application. These products, these primitive products, were sophisticated enough to spit out code. So you visualize what you want. Think of it as almost like a flow diagram, if then else, and has these conditions. But it would pump out the code, whether the code was database code.
Like bring that up a level.
Yeah.
Like let's start with the visualization. You said it's kind of like a flow chart. Maybe tell us a little bit more what in that day and age, what that would have looked like.
I mean, that was voodoo science. And, so imagine you're on a primitive Windows 3.1 machine, literally. I mean, and you have loaded this software in with floppy disks. And what the pilot, the end user of this product would see is a palette. And this palette is emblematic of objects that would exist in a software system. So conditional elements, objects like that we would now know as a container, things of this. And what you would do is link these objects together conditionally.
And what would an object, like think of a example of an object? And
let me give you two good examples. Like for the former software engineers in your audience, in C++, it's a class, right? In the world of databases, it's a table. So these are very well-known constructs. And one manipulates data, one stores data. And the hardest part prior to that was, the monolithic amount of waterfall engineering exercises you had to go through to get it done right. People like, God, the kids today who are engineering stuff in the cloud, you can push code as fast as anything. Back in those days, if you had very explicit windows of time where you generate the code, likely impress it upon some sort of media like a disk or a DVD in later years, box it and ship it, right? So you had to measure 3 times before you cut once. Modeling tools would help eradicate a lot of that cycle time of just staring at code and understanding its relationships. So that became an obsession. Like I got it. But to wrap up the question that you had asked, this was my first piloting of building my own product that actually did this. There were granddaddies. Texas Instruments was a good example of a company that was a marquee software vendor at the time. None of your, especially young people, other than calculators, know what TI is, right? But then they were one of the mainstays of that. And that was sort of the world that I entered in.
And that wasn't really that long ago.
No,
they were
it was
a meaningful
25,
company.
30 years ago.
Now, you barely even hear their name. I don't know what happened to them.
No doubt. The internet is what happened to them. And more specifically, before the internet, it became, you could watch the transition from, monolithic software that it was installed on premise to then it morphed into stuff that you would install on a computer, like an actual desktop or laptop. And now that is all transgressed and progressed into the cloud. Like you're watching these evolutions happen. So
and your role was product development at the time?
100%. I was the product manager on this product unit. And it was foundational. It was like, from the first lines of code, and was surrounded by really good people. Made the engineering team that was given to me was a guy and a team that literally wrote the video driver system and cards for the first Windows implementation for Microsoft. So incredibly hardcore. Like I was taught discipline and rigor and fear by this. I mean, 7 days a week, they were in Pacific Grove, California.
I like the way you put and cards in there.
And cards.
Yes. A lot of people don't know that's first computers were on cards and you punched holes in them.
That was it, So, really the blessing was seeing, now looking back is just seeing the radical progressions we've made in the world of software and engineering and, the way we go about work. But I can't tell you, the blessing is understanding that rigor, like what it took to, like, no one will hear my sons, if they do software engineering or whatever, like the young class of entrepreneur, they will never know what it's like to hear the hum of DVD printers on the last day of a month, to box the software, put a UPS stamp on it, get it out the door to recognize revenue.
Yeah.
No one will understand that rigor, right? And those they leave more than a big impression about how I still work to this day. So yeah, that was the past.
Wow. So what happened to the company?
It became a thing. So that 10 or 15 people grew to, 500 or 600. Probably this is 99, 2000. We decide that it is, high time to file an S1, which we did. And we took it public in April of 2000.
Good timing.
Which was a phenomenal timing for anyone who really remembers that. And we ended up being the number one, net producing, deal of the year. We beat Krispy Kreme donuts.
All right.
That was cool. That was fun. But it was a very interesting time. Way, way, way different market than we have today.
Yeah.
We were profitable. There was no venture capital in the business. So everything was upside. And,
what was the ownership structure, if that was the case?
It was Steven and his brother. And, people, every employee had equity. But the executive team, myself, like we benefited, substantially from that. And but the market was totally different. I mean, the company was probably, my hazy memory is, call it 60 million in revenue. And the proceeds were immense. Fast forward, we then entered into the whole world of the crazy markets that happened. And the first, like by 2003 and 2004, you saw the first kind of pressure test on the market, after the dot-com implosion. We picked up steam again. And by 2007 and 8, when the major markets started to crumble, we thought it was a good time to sell. And we did. And we went through a go private through, at the time, Thoma Cressy Bravo, which is now Thoma Bravo. was one of Orlando Bravo's first deals. So I get to watch that process, the PE process, in proper action as a person at the table, by that point.
But somewhere in there is when you came here to Boulder, so you must have still been with them.
Good. You're tracking.
Well, you know what? I'm not as slow as I look.
So after, the taking it public, it got to a point where, remote working wasn't a thing back then. We had beautiful offices. It was great. But I was on the road so much. It was 3 years in a row of 1K plus, like on United. And I basically walked into Stephen Wong's office and I'm like, dude, I gotta go fix this thing. It's not fair to my wife or whatever. We've made a choice. We're going to go to this place called Boulder. And his first reaction was, I can't believe it took you this long to ask me. So, and him being a Bay Area lifer, he's like, is there an airport near there? Not knowing much about Colorado. I'm like, yes, Stephen, there is. And that is
brand new international one, as a matter of fact.
So at that time, it was, Stapleton was like winding down, or it was already wound down. And, but that's how we got here. It was all choice. I was going to be on airplanes anyways, and to give our kids a new experience, and the draw for anyone who's really, this hopefully isn't boring anybody, the educational system. So imagine two young parents and you're obsessing over like the best possible education. We didn't feel that was going to be possible in California at that time. Mm-hmm. And we chose Colorado. We did all the analysis you can imagine that a great product leader would. And
did you know anyone here?
None.
So what's your first memory of seeing Boulder? Do you have
I do. This is interesting, and it's related somewhat to tech, but so I am a cycling nerd. I'm one of not unlike Robin, I've raced bikes for a long time, lifelong athlete, got to race at pretty high levels.
I did not know that about you.
Did. And so I was racing a bunch in the Bay Area, and we chose Boulder, not just because of Boulder, but because of bike racing too. Mm-hmm. And I could train here. My wife was a competitive runner at the time too. So we go and we fly out with our two babies to look at houses. And we're kind of patrolling Boulder. And honestly, we had this nice old, house in San Francisco. So we're kind of comparing it to that. And we're pretty let down. Quite honestly, we're like, what is going on here in Boulder? I thought it was different. And, we couldn't afford the big mansions on the quote hill, but we were looking reasonably. There's a lot of 1970s stuff. And then we pulled up into North Boulder, which basically everyone thought was Longmont and not Boulder at the time. And we're waiting for a real estate agent to come.
Yeah, which, by the way, that's where we're at right now is North Boulder.
We're in North
called
Boulder.
The Old North is where we're sitting right now.
That's right.
It's kind of from here.
You're at the
from
edge.
The north, yeah.
You're at the edge. We're like in the Netherlands. So we're waiting, and the kids are asleep. I'm in the car, and I see this car pull up behind me. I'm looking in the rearview mirror, and it's got a bike rack with all the bikes on the top. I'm like, I look at my wife, and my tail starts wagging. I'm like, I'll be right back. So I go and run down the street, and I meet some of the first people who I'm dear friends with to this day, Scott Reardon. If you remember Scott.
Of course I remember Scott.
And
Scott, I've got a lot of word stories together.
Of course you do. He is person number one on earth.
Great guy.
Who else? Gordon Boyce comes walking out of his house.
Okay.
So those are my two neighbors.
Yep. Gordon's also history with us.
Of course. And this other guy, Kevin Cawley. Kevin becomes my entry point. He is a longtime known entity in the Boulder world of the startup world as an engineer, CTO for hire, incredible talent. And he is the one who introduces me to the underbelly of the world of Boulder and its tech system. So, we go on rides. By this point, we're moved in, and he's like, dude, I've got to hook you up with this company. It's a brand new venture firm. I think it's called The Foundry or something. And I'm like, cool, sweet. I will do that. Thanks for the hookup. And he never does. And comes to pass, I am going through SFO on one of my billion flights, and flight's delayed. It's late at night, going through the x-ray machine. I go first, and I see this MacBook come through the x-ray machine. It's got a Foundry sticker on it. I'm like, oh, Foundry Group. I'm supposed to meet with with some folks. I'm kind of new to Boulder, and I'm supposed to meet with somebody there. And this gentleman sticks his hand out. He says, "Hi, I'm Brad Feld." And we sat and we talked, and the flight's delayed, and we sort of talked about all the things in Boulder and what he was doing and what's possible, and the need for more engineering and product related folks in the software world in town. That next morning, I think this is not an embellishment, there must have been 50 emails in my inbox just connecting me with everybody.
And he would only do that if he really thought highly of you, because everyone wants Brad, even back then, everyone wants Brad to introduce them to people. And he would be very thoughtful in the way he would go about doing it.
Very.
And so if he was honored, you got 50 introductions from him, he thought you were the real deal. And to this day, I've now fast forward, worked on a number of his portfolio companies, and this ultimate one now being paired with probably his most renowned bet, which was Rajat Bhargava, my co-founder at JumpCloud. Yeah, before we get to JumpCloud, let's kind of connect. You met Brad. You got here 2005, did you say?
Late 2003.
Oh, late 2003.
Yeah.
So you were still with the other company for
for
a period of time.
Until 2007. Yeah.
2007. So 2007, we launched Zayo, by the way. The very year we launched Zayo right in downtown Boulder. So what did you do in 2007, 2008? What was your transition?
So we sold the biz, stayed my obligatory year, as PE firms do with the golden handcuffs that they give you, and exited. And at this point, I am thinking, I know all the things. I could totally do a startup. I'm so smart. So I made it sort of this mission to, I started working first with some of Brad and at the time Seth Levine's companies. Seth is a bike nerd like I was. We did a lot of riding together, talk about tech. So he would put me into some of these companies. This is how I met Todd Vernon, worked with him for a while, and some other folks here in town. It culminated in, this moment, which I think every quote entrepreneur goes through, which is I'm never going to learn unless I do it on my own. And I worked with a co-founder of mine. This is probably 2009. Techstars is now a thing. They have just gone through their first class, and we decided to pitch. And something I'd never done, never anticipated not doing business to business software, but I wanted to do this consumer thing, which was it was a mobile video app. It predated Instagram. So missed the timing on that. And
do you remember what made you want to do that? Because that's a pretty big shift.
It's a massive
from what
shift.
You were doing.
So funny enough, I was doing a ton of blogging, personal stuff. I would talk about business and tech and cycling and all the things. And the other companies, the Foundry Group companies that I had worked with were all in the world of ad tech. So I could really start to see the monetization power of what the mobile phone was going to do. I could see it. I could smell it. And I thought video.
Because a lot of people think the iPhone's been around forever.
No,
but
2007.
2007 since right when you're getting going.
Right then.
On your own.
So, the iPhone drops. We're all playing with it. It's still pretty primitive, but you definitely knew this thing is going to get super polished really quickly.
And the App Store was 2008 or 2009? It wasn't much after.
Probably 8 or 9. Yeah. And,
so the App Store's just coming onto the scene.
You got it. And I'm thinking, if we could, I was the sort of technical co-founder and working with my business co-founder, if we could take this tech and scale it, we could start to, the technical problem we were solving was really quite difficult. It was the new age of video compression and dealing with that from the mobile handheld unit to the cloud. And, it was a very big set of technical challenges, which I loved. I was intellectually stimulated by. But here's what, I often counsel people on. This was like the business. We spent 2 years and our own personal money. We were against trying to raise capital, ended up raising a little bit, but it was a little bit pig-headedness, probably on both mine and my co-founder's part. We didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel until it was too late. And what that light was David Cohen's voice. When we took the thing through Techstars, and I'll never, he said it in front of us, but we didn't pick up the signals. And what the mentoring was to the class of companies was really understand what you're building. Are you building a feature? Are you building a product? Or are you building a categorical changing platform or business that's scalable? We're building a feature. We were so ensconced, immersed in what the technology problem could do, we couldn't see the forest. We were looking at not only a tree, but a branch of the tree, right? And that was youthful naivete, and it taught. When you really hear, and I had never experienced this before, when you get punched in the gut and you have failed, that is the life lesson. And it instigated so much thought that I would never let that happen again.
That's an interesting thing to riff on a little bit because, I just published the book, and the book's about kind of the broader industry and all the characters. And certainly there are a lot of colorful stories in there, but I also had to reflect deeply about my journey and revisit, portions of it. And, I would quickly revisit the portions that went well, but then I would dwell on, those, periods of time where things didn't go well, where you had true failure, not just, made a mistake and corrected it, but where you're like, oh shit, where am I at right now? What did I do? And how did I get myself into that mess?
Right.
How did I get myself out of it? And, those, as from the vantage point I sit now, invest in companies. I work with entrepreneurs. We build up our own team. There's times I see people kind of getting into situations, and you can only kind of be there around them to sort of be helpful to the extent they're wanting to tap into help. But you see some of them making those kind of, more grave mistakes. You're like, those are the kind of mistakes good news is you're going to learn from them, but it's going to hurt. It's going to be punched in the gut, and you're going to maybe have wished you didn't have to learn it in such a hard way.
For the first time, Dan Caruso pulls back the curtain in his book Bandwidth, a memoir that celebrates the pioneers who invented the internet's early backbones, the renegades who lit the fiber revolution, the antics that caused the biggest market crash of all time, and the new wave of entrepreneurs who led the industry back from its ashes. Though it seemed to happen in the blink of an eye, the Bandwidth adventure was a multi-decade roller coaster ride involving larger-than-life successes and devastating failures. The unbridled ambition of newly minted billionaires and high-profile tycoons created extraordinary value, unprecedented value destruction, and endless opportunities for a brave few. This reflects tech's past, present, and future, and is a story you won't soon forget. It will help you prosper during today's AI tech bubble. The book is available at dan-caruso.com/bandwidthbook and released in early 2025.
Yeah, and listen, not unlike parenting, so I don't know all the things, but I know what hurts, and I will give advice to anyone who will take it. But I'm not going to parent over it. And if you can't listen and you can't learn and modify behavior and your outcomes, then the hard lessons need to be learned.
Yeah, the tricky part though, and I'm in a situation like this right now where I can see the story playing out. Very, very capable CEO, but with an area that's a pretty significant blind spot. And it's stuff we can sort through, but he seems more likely to need to learn kind of the lesson the hard way. The situation, though, is such that the hard way won't just apply to him. It'll apply to several others, including the investors who are like, man, if this happens, this will be in the unforced error category.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're the CEO and you're doing a great job overall. It's not a CEO that is kind of a problem where you need to solve the CEO. It's that in this aspect, you're just maybe not realizing kind of how big of a blind spot that is. And when
it's true,
when there's a price to be paid for that, it's going to be a punch in the gut that's going to that we're all going to feel.
Right. And it just becomes, it's like orders of magnitude. The deeper you get, the more money you raise, the more responsibility the leadership has, the CEO most critically. I think the number one thing is like that CEOs, any top level, C-level executive leader needs to have are mentors that don't feed them their own BS. You have to have people who will call you out. And I don't know, I don't know the situation or who this person is, but if they are not able to hear that, that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a huge hole in, the character of that leader.
Yeah. Well, I got to say I had that huge flaw and it was a flaw in character as me as a leader. So I agree with you, but sometimes that same flaw, which is a serious flaw, is also what is correlated to, the grit and perseverance that people with that flaw have to kind of fight their way through. It's like, there's an easy button is what I'd like to say now. And I would have that easy button presented to me and I would be like, nope, I'm going to go the hard path.
There you go.
Hey, let's talk. We'll come back to your story in a little bit, but let's talk about Endeavor right now, because Endeavor, I know you're passionate about it and you guys are like the poster child for how to really leverage Endeavor. So you're kind of role models in that way as well. And it's when people say, what's Endeavor all about? And we'll talk about, I want you to describe Endeavor from your lens. I often talk about what we're talking about right now, which is, hey, these really compelling leaders who are building really interesting companies, they're gonna, in their own unique journey, they're gonna hit kind of, spots on their road that, make them feel vulnerable, make them feel maybe a little bit alone and not sure where to turn. They can't go to their board necessarily. Their spouse doesn't want to hear them talk about the business anymore. Plus doesn't really kind of fully understand the context. They certainly don't want to go to their management team. So one of the ways Endeavor plays a really unique role is gives you access to people who've been there and done that you can have real conversations with that maybe are a step removed from talking to your investors or talking to your board. So tell us what Endeavor is from your lens and how you guys have leveraged it.
So for the uninitiated, you can visit the website endeavor.org. It's a global network of businesses and the entrepreneurs who've created those businesses, who are a collection of people designed to help each other.
Which, by the way, Linda, we just recorded a podcast.
You did?
So it hasn't dropped yet, but it's probably going to drop a week or two before yours drops. So
then it's perfect timing.
So good timing.
Linda's the CEO of the Endeavor organization. And the genesis of this was really interesting in that, here we are, in the United States, super blessed. They have all the money on planet Earth over the last, century or more. And in later years, like the last 20 years or so, it became very clear that we still are the center of the gravity on how the best and biggest businesses on earth, right? So this organization established itself to help really connect entrepreneurs to understand how to build thriving, scaled businesses.
Typically tech.
Very typically tech, without necessarily having any roots in the United States, right? It got more interesting that, when we think about Endeavor here, even in the United States, like places like Colorado, let's face it, we have, only a portion of the amount of venture capital that you can find on either one of our coasts. So we got to do a lot of scrappy maneuvering to really create inertia here, right? Mm-hmm. Endeavor is a perfect example of how to build a network and help what goes on here. You see the same thing even in Florida, right? Tech is actually built in Florida, and other places like that. So fast forward, Rajat, my co-founder, and I, he went through the selection process first. As you know, Raj,
yes.
So he's a very well-known entrepreneur, very successful, and really teaches the virtues of how to get stuff done. He wrote, not metaphorically, literally the book, The Startup Playbook. So that has a lot of cred and teaching other entrepreneurs around the globe how to get it done. What's in a term sheet is advantageous to you and from your side of the table, right? These are the basics that, I mean, Dan, right now, you and I could go down to Ozo Coffee and bump into 4 or 5 people we've probably never met that have raised money in their past, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go to Ankara, Turkey and try that.
Yep.
That is not
and why
falling off
use
trees.
Turkey as an example, or maybe say it a little bit differently? How expansive is Endeavor now? Where does it touch in the world?
I mean, I don't even know how many countries we're in now, 100 plus, and now some of the world's largest unicorns, decacorns, are not United States based, and they're all part of the network.
Yeah, the Endeavor network is currently in about 45 countries with a target to get in 100 countries. And you think about that. I mean, you get past. Well, back when this started, the only countries that really had tech entrepreneurial ecosystems were U.S., China, and India.
That's right.
And they've avoided China and India because of the development of those systems already existed, but pretty much expanded across. Well, you get to like 45 countries across the world.
Yeah.
That's a lot already.
That's right.
Like the most recent examples included Pakistan as an example. So Poland as an example, and most recently Ukraine as an example. So these are countries that you wouldn't think of when you think of a unicorn or a decacorn, but you're starting to see unicorns and decacorns pop up in many of these countries. So it's all about kind of connecting this isn't for startups, this is for scale up. So you already are on a path to success. You're already getting onto maybe not the world stage, but certainly beyond whatever your limited geography is. And you want to be part of a group where there's lots of other entrepreneurs who are also in the scale up portion of their journey, plus the boards and supporters around it who are been there, done there, venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, people want to give back to their communities and give back to this maybe broader religion of entrepreneurship and startups. Like, hey, tech is good, and the more areas that have a vibrant tech ecosystem, the better. And you guys have been just fantastic in not just how to leverage the system, but how to give back to the whole system by being out there, meeting with the different Endeavor companies and offices across the world, and kind of leveraging kind of what you're trying to accomplish with what they're trying to accomplish. It's been a treat to watch.
I've used the word blessing many times on this podcast already, and that org over the last couple of years, I've been selected as an EE, Endeavor Entrepreneur. It just has changed my whole outset. Like here's the deal. The deal is, it is like doing this scale up or being in a scale up, especially in a co-founder situation, is the most lonely possible place I never thought I'd be. You know what I mean? That is not.
I do know what you mean.
And I'm not crying over it. It is just like it was unexpected, and you have to adjust your not behaviors as much as just like your expectations, right? And when you have the opportunity to really melt into a conversation with somebody who is in that, and you can help, or they can help you, this is a psychologist, psychiatrist, they can't help you. They cannot help you in those moments. Like when you were talking about the isolation of almost paralysis you get into, being a leader, at something that has so much at stake. And you have in our case, 1,000 employees, and these are employees who are phenomenal, and they're on the journey with you. You know what I mean? And they're depending upon this to succeed. So that pressure is enormous. And if you can give as much as you get and talk people through things, through situations, and those situations, Dan, range from name it, either, hey, we need to hire a new CTO, or man, we are having a people issue or a scaling issue, and
or an investor issue, a board member issue.
Name it. Just pick a topic, right?
Or even something's going on in your personal life, and as kind of someone responsible for,
very much so.
In your case, a multi-billion-dollar, valuation company. I mean, it's hard to kind of take a pause, or a medical issue.
Or a medical issue, which I have absolutely experienced that with an EE from another country in the Middle East that I'm endeared to, and had to step back. And I have created incredible friends that are just on the basis of like getting to know each other and feeling that vulnerable. And by the way, they host what are these retreats. I've never been to one. And I'm like, Raj, my co-founder, was like, dude, you should really go. I'm like, you kind of like eye rolly.
Yeah. Cause you're so busy and you travel a lot, your family.
And it's like,
it's hard to carve out the time.
And you feel a little guilt and like, sorry, hon, I can't take you with me on this thing or whatever. But, wow, was I wrong? Again,
where did you go?
This one was the one in Scotts Valley. So Santa Cruz, California was last year.
Okay.
And in affect, they sit you down and you're naked, not physically, but you just, really are encouraged to just speak vulnerably. And we did. And some of the stuff that transpires,
wow.
Like it's really,
I could have used that in my journey for certain. Which is one of the reasons why I helped, led the launch of Endeavor, Colorado. Linda was on my board at SAO, which, was very fortuitous.
Right.
And then one of the reasons that I launched Endeavor, Colorado, and I believe in it, is because I look back at my journey and say, man, if I would have had, that in place with the trusted relationships, there were critical times that I would have been all over that. And, I really didn't have places to turn when you feel most vulnerable and most exposed. I mean, like you said, it's like, we've been, I'll use your word, blessed to be part of these really compelling, life journeys. So this isn't complaining and this isn't, woe is us, but it is a recognition that when you're in that leadership chair, you feel an immense responsibility for employees,
right.
immense responsibility to deliver for your customers and to deliver for your investors. You feel that, when you go to sleep at night, you feel that when you wake up in the morning, you feel like that when you pop up in the middle of the night. It just is with you all the time. And
that's right.
If things are going well, great.
Right.
But sometimes you get yourself boxed in a corner and you're not really sure. And yet you don't want to show weakness. You don't want to show uncertainty because people want you to have at least some sort of answers. So
you got it.
That's when you need it the most.
You really do. And you can melt in and, that is perfectly well said. Those, even in 11 years I've operated with Raj, we've been through 3 probably of highs and low cycles in the market and everything, and it's very, very important to just, you have to build in durability into your heart to be able to sustain this. And by the way, like our investors are great, all those things are great, but you can't have those conversations with your investors, right? Maybe if they were here in this room, they would say, what are you talking about? Of course you can. Listen, like, let me separate church and state a bit. You know? And, to be able to have a vehicle to talk through those problems is incredibly important for the entrepreneurs in your group. You don't necessarily need Endeavor. I think it's wonderful. May not be the solution for, your scale up or, business. But if you don't have an ecosystem of mentors, you're doing it wrong. Mm-hmm. And if you think you have, that much capability, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. If the first time you need a mentor, if what you do is say, I need to find a mentor, you waited way too late because you want to develop those. And mentor maybe is a bit of, you want to develop the relationships, whether they're mentors or not mentors. But and this is a lesson I had to learn the hard way when I needed kind of an ecosystem that was outside of the company I was with and inside Colorado, which wasn't where my strong networks were at the time. I had never taken the time to invest to develop that. And that's going back to maybe 2003 timeframe,
right?
When that full realization hit me. And, from that point forward, it's like overinvest and just building relationships and, be there for the other people. And maybe at some point, it'll help you in your journey as well. And, fortunately, I learned that maybe late to some degree, but maybe early by a lot of other standards. And it's so important.
Well, seeing, you operate in, especially in and around the Endeavor network, it's very clear that downstream, the people that still are next to you, with you, supporting you on whether it's new positions at Endeavor or wherever, you definitely play that role. I can see it, and that's how they reflect on you when I talk with them.
Good. So let's get back to your journey. So now we're you went and tried to do the startup with your partner, didn't take outside money, and you started to say, you learned some lessons. So this is 2010 timeframe?
9, 10. Yeah.
Yep.
In there. Yeah. So, it's very clear, the numbers aren't working. And some of those numbers are personal, like when you're tearing out a checkbook out of your family checkbook and,
giving back is
capitalizing the business or yourself to sustain it. And
you want to give back, but that's not the best way to give back.
And, you're watching the proceeds of your prior things just get eradicated. Those are difficult conversations. And, now you can see where some people, that old analogy of, I'm just going to keep digging. I know the diamond is right underneath there. And, for me, it was like, I knew quantifiably for a variety of reasons, this isn't going to work. Right. It's just, let's call it a day. So,
which is hard to do. I mean, it's hard to
incredibly hard
let go of something.
Yeah. This is the ego thing. Like, I really I just am impressed and, honored to be in this town. There's so many amazing entrepreneurs, and you want to demonstrate that you have that juice too. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And,
exactly what you mean.
And it's so
having been there.
And that's a mistake. Yeah. I was not doing this for me anymore. I was doing this for a shadow of myself, So that's the background. We just,
it's easy to fall in that trap. I mean, really easy to fall in that trap because I don't even know. I'm not a psychiatrist, but it's you feel like you're trying to prove something, to the someones, and they probably care a lot less about what you're trying to prove than you think.
Really, they want to see you happy and succeed, and they're not sitting there with a grade book, right? So
although in general, I think more people than not. I don't want to say this the wrong way. When people have struggles, failures, others talk about that more than talk about when you're having successes. I don't want to say people want to see you fail, but I think human nature is one where when attention gets drawn to those who are kind of struggling or did something bad or stupid or whatever. So you're that's just part of what we sign up to.
Yeah, luck is what you make it.
Yeah, if you don't like it, do something uneventful with your life.
100%. That's right.
So what did you do then?
So I mean, by this point, I'm truly, Dan, I'm thinking, we're now 7 or so years into living here. I'm really thinking, it's time to flip it, head back to the Bay Area, right? Worked on another small thing with the Foundry Group, and I kept coming back to, I can't build anything here. I can't build anything here. I didn't feel surrounded with the right people. There was a different attitude. Maybe I'm a bit paranoid, but I like to keep pushing. And I was out. I'm like, my wife and I had agreed we're going to move back to the Bay Area and re-tap into my network there and go and do things. And it was around the time of Brad's partner, Seth Levine, who again is a friend of mine. We celebrated his 40th. I think, God, this is incredible, but his 40th birthday, and a bunch of us are there celebrating, and Brad Feld is there, and we're talking through.
Didn't we just celebrate his 50th birthday not that long ago?
I know. Seriously,
I think it's like 2 years ago.
Seriously, this is the dating machine. The date machine. So, or the Wayback Machine. And, I'm sort of insinuating I'm going to go and do this and, make like a long story short, Brad sort of stops me in my tracks. It's like, wait a minute, don't leave yet. There's a guy I think you should meet, and I can't believe you guys have never met. And his name is Rajat Bhargava. I'm like, I'm squinting my eyes. I'm like, who? I literally, spent almost the better part of a decade here. I figure everybody
in the Ontario scene.
Yeah, and like being in the scene, and I never heard him, but as it comes to pass, Raj is just a person who he operates like he doesn't need sunshine and notoriety. He just executes. And Brad paired us, and that was the whole sort of background of like, getting together on this thing called JumpCloud.
Yep.
So that's how we got connected.
And what is JumpCloud? What is JumpCloud today? I'm sure there were pivots along the way, but let's start with the here and now.
Yeah.
We'll talk about, how you got from an original idea to here, but what is JumpCloud?
Yeah.
What's it all about? How does it fit into the world?
Beyond it being what I consider now my third son. So let me answer the question. We are, if you start at the very top, we are a security software vendor. Go down, double click one layer. We are in the world of identity and device management. So we are an access control system. We are now, if you talk about the here and now.
Well, that probably doesn't mean much to a lot of people.
Let's parameterize it. So anyone watching this probably has a day job or did. And if you envision what that
hopefully my viewership still has day jobs.
Jobs. If you envision your experience of day one of your new job, the employer probably gives you a laptop, and depending upon your role, you have the need to access a ton of different applications and things, right? We are the system that provides access to anything the employer needs to give that person. And we decided to do things a little bit differently than the prototypical approaches, incidentally.
So give us some examples of what the employer wants to give you access to.
So again, start with the machine, Windows machine, a Linux laptop, a MacBook, depending upon what the employer has in their inventory, what they choose to manage.
The employer wants it to be secure.
You got it. So second part of that journey is like, we're one of the elements that deeply secures the machine for the employer. So for example, you can watch people walk away from their laptop. What's the one thing that I see now as a pretty veteran security person? They leave it open. The screensaver doesn't turn on. There's hundreds of little configurations that harden a machine so that the bad guys can't penetrate it, at least externally, let alone from internally, right? Through a piece of malware. So depending upon your role, if I'm an engineer, I need infrastructure access, coding tools, my repositories for code. Now AI tools like Copilot, I have a Confluence and Jira for, my ticketing systems and all those things. On average, we see that an employee will have no less than 42 applications. They don't even realize how many things that they're accessing. It's crazy. So we are the basis to, formulate an identity for the employee inside of the organization. And we grant it its entitlements and give them access to all the things, right? So some of your viewers may be familiar with Microsoft technologies. And, the genesis of JumpCloud, when Raj and I sort of retooled the thesis, I'll explain what I mean by that in a second, was and remains this age-old product called Active Directory. Everybody, if you've been in any industry for a decade, you've seen this thing, you've logged in, not even understanding you're logging in using Active Directory credentials. But, Microsoft being Microsoft, really built their own ecosystem on the top of this access control system. So their Windows operating system, their Windows Server, SharePoint, Outlook Exchange, and, the modern variants like M365. So all the collaboration tools, they're all designed to work harmoniously on their access control system. What we have now learned is that is the crown jewel identity in Microsoft is the crown jewel of keeping that enterprise so sticky. That and licensing practices, which you're reading about in the news, make it very hard to get off of Microsoft and let small companies like ours, and companies like Google, like who would love to see their workspace product used in favor of M365. You know how hard that is to do because of the stranglehold that monolith called Microsoft has, all because of the identity entrapment.
Mm-hmm.
So, like that's sort of like, we are the thing that gives employees access. But rewind when, Raj had been seed funding frankly, two companies at the time. This is probably 2012, 2013.
I think that's about the time I met Raj. We didn't spend much time together back then, but that seems because then he was on Pearl Street.
Yeah, we were, we had a small little co-working right next to the Boulder Theater.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a number of different companies that he was sort of, putting different monies to work at.
Yeah, it was kind of a studio. I don't know if
very
it
much
was
so.
Studio back then, but kind of a studio concept. He's going to help launch multiple companies.
That was it.
Yeah.
We called it the village. You walk in and there'd be different activities going on. And in one of the corridors of this building, of this basically big room, there were two smaller companies like looking at solving an access problem for Linux servers, right? It was designed for DevOps engineers. And clearly, remember my are you building a feature, product, or categorical changing thing? It was really, they were building maybe a product, and it, was very niche. And, at the time, people were moving away from GUI oriented products, and they were using, this is in the world of DevOps. So they were using Chef and Puppet and different coding technologies to manage infrastructure. So, Raj it must have been like 2008, and another security company he was working on really kind of squinted his eyes because his software engineers came to him to say, hey, boss, we have to take our software and we've been required to write our authentication into this Microsoft product called Active Directory. And that was a head scratcher for him. Now, we all know now that if you're running an enterprise, you need uniform identity. Microsoft was the king at the time, still is. 95% of the world's access controls runs on Microsoft. I look at that as an opportunity. And, it became clear that, all right, we got to write the code. And he put that, it was an itch that he just couldn't scratch. Fast forward, we get together and he's like, what do you think about this Active Directory thing? Is the world ready for an alternative? Like, could we credibly do something like that?
Yeah.
And it was like an electric, all the Dave Cohen messages and everything in my brain, every nerve in my body. And this is not a gross embellishment. I almost overreacted. And I'm like, yes, like that. It was like a very clear visceral reaction to, if we can, depolarize Microsoft from that position and provide alternative, like that is the stickiest place you could ever possibly be in an enterprise from a software and an IT perspective, is right there in the neural epicenter of access control. And I couldn't control myself. And I'm like, yes, we need to do this and we need to go now. And
but that's technically a big problem because you have a monopoly. We're having monopoly control over this important segment. So how did you think about it from the perspective of how are we going to be able to get through their monopoly?
First of all, like, never let me do this again. this is the hardest technology problem and frankly, business maneuvering problem I've ever faced. Right. Mm-hmm. So here is a couple of things that I think Raj and I, agreed upon, and that really forged our alliance, which was, we can't go about this in the normal enterprise software way, right? Like, seriously, Dan, think about all the companies you've experienced, either at leading companies and the tactics that they sell. And we didn't want to do that. B, we needed to get scale super fast. And C, that we could sit on. Raj wasn't going to continue to write checks, right? So we need to demonstrate before we raise some money that we could, create a spark. So we did the opposite of, enterprise selling, and we went product-led growth. So that wasn't even an acronym. PLG was not even an acronym in 2013. It was how Raj and I, when we wrote like this thesis of JumpCloud, which is, here's what we want to go and build. We want to build the world an alternative to Active Directory, give people freedom of choice. Here's, technologically what we want to build. That was like chapter 1 of the thesis. Chapter 2 of a 2-chapter book was here's how we want a GTM. And the GTM
go to market.
Go to market.
So here's how we're going to take this product and bring it to market.
You got it. So we needed to demonstrate scale, move fast, and the term PLG didn't exist then. But what we kept saying was we want to bring enterprise-grade software to customers using consumer-style tactics, like purchasing tactics. So, with the bare minimum, like Brad, I think, or someone, maybe Foundry wrote a very, a minimal check for us to kind of like, all right, Foundry was in, we think we see what you got. Let's go see what you can do kind of thing. With some of those monies, we did 2 things. One, we doubled down on programmatic marketing and SEO. Raj was writing content. I was writing content. We didn't even hire people yet. So we're writing all these technical articles, handing them to someone to SEO tag and, get them ready for search, and we did that. Then I started hiring engineers to do, it was called growth hacking, but here what I did was I had engineers who they were kind of full stack engineers, but they would experiment on engagement in the product, right? So you'd sign up and, this is even in the earliest days, like we needed to be understandable from the word go, right? And the last component was, which many were not doing in the enterprise software selling space, was giving it away for free. And we wanted a hook. And now on any given day, there are over 200,000 orgs, many of which are free. And we wanted that way, just humming on our platform, just getting them used to the idea of an alternate way of thinking about access control instead of their known
and would the
Microsoft
customer,
patterns.
when they would adopt it, or when you envision them to adopt it, would you envision, okay, they're not going to let go of Microsoft for their core, but we could start introducing this to be a second kind of Active Directory system? Or were you finding customers who weren't dependent on Microsoft?
That is a shrewd question. Very interesting question. So the answer is no. We wanted the pole position. So here is one of the difference in the target ICP, ideal customer profile. We intentionally, premeditatively focused on the mid-market. And there was a number of reasons for that. The first was that the TAM is huge. The total addressable market is huge. At this time, so 2013, 14, 15, venture is, really starting to accelerate. Yeah. The cloud is like, everybody's building something in space now, right? So the patterns and the way companies that were being born at the clip they were being born looked nothing like, from an IT perspective, looked nothing like these traditional enterprises that embraced Microsoft. Example, I had just, come from a decade's worth of startup building here in town, right? Anything I could put a credit card in to run the business, Salesforce, Amazon, Google Workspace, the primitive stuff, right? To operate the business, I would do, right? We didn't have any closets. I didn't have any servers. I didn't want my engineers managing applications, on our Amazon infrastructure. I didn't want them to deal with that. So just use SaaS products. Everybody wanted a MacBook. That's what they wanted to be on, or a Linux laptop so they could hack it up, and engineers like that stuff, right? So these companies looked nothing like a standard issue, cookie cutter, Microsoft shop. Many of the young kids we were hiring as engineers, they didn't even know what Office was. They had come from universities that were their own Google Workspace, right? Or Google Apps at the time, right? So that character of company was who we premeditatively went after.
Yeah.
So
makes sense.
It did, and we then morphed into, oh, you guys are the other guys, right? And that's what we wanted, a Coke versus Pepsi kind of narrative between modern access control and legacy access control.
Yep.
And that was like what we really focused on.
So I assume there had to be some pivots along the way in order to kind of get on the track you were on. Either that or you were a genius from the very beginning. But what kind of pivots did you have to encounter, if any?
This is truly, when I say this doesn't mean to sound like an egotistical nerd. This is the one time in my career where the pathway to, and I don't, we're on a pathway to success, but it wasn't met with a left turn and a right turn, and we failed here. The adoption was pretty instantaneous.
Really?
It was very instantaneous. People got it right away. So really what it became down was a doubling down of, when you think about all of the things that encompass access control, it is like a cacophony of acronyms, categories, right? I'll pick a few. MFA, multi-factor authentication, MDM, mobile device management, IDP, identity, just basically the basis of identity, like a directory system, SSO, single sign-on. These are all things that are different categories, right? And we decided to bake them into one contiguous platform. Mm-hmm. So really, I'm not being snarky. Like, we knew what we wanted to do, but it became a deprioritization exercise of, what mattered first in what sequence, because we did not have all the engineers, certainly that we have today. And you had to really measure twice, cut once.
You mentioned Boundary put a small check in when you were trying to think through how you're going to bring this market. How'd your cap table evolve from there? So we... and cap table, how did your investor backing is what that shorthand for? So we, here's a brief history of time. Fast forward to date, we've raised a little under $500 million in capital. Go back to the day Foundry, got us, really more than bootstrapped. It got us the hiring that we needed to from the early days. What it got us to was our B and most profoundly our C round. And by that point, we had real paying customers. It was more than green spouts, couple, 3-4 million a year. And at that moment in time, 3-4 million a year of revenue, of
ARR, right? And fast forward, we get introduced to this venture team based out of Boston called OpenView. OpenView they did, I think, 5 investments a year. That was part of their thesis. It wasn't a huge fund, probably analogous to like a Foundry, but they only focused on SaaS and they only focused on product-led growth-driven companies, right? And for the first time, what I witnessed, how you both sides of the table, like you are an entrepreneur, so you pitch your idea and, depending on what stage you are, right? And in this instance, so that early on, BC, they pitched us. They were like, listen, we know about you guys. Give us all the data, all of it. And we did. We obliged that. Everything from our marketing data out of this various systems to Salesforce to just whatever we could give, you just hand it over to them. And a month later, they come back and they said, we are definitely in. And what they did was decompose the efficacy of, how we were going about expanding. So we were demonstrating some crazy NRR at that time, net revenue retention, which is a notable example of how SaaS-based companies can expand their footprint within companies. And they provided at the time an example of the proclivity of somebody to purchase when they did certain things within our platform. And while I had a growth engineering team, they weren't examining the data in quite the same way the OpenView guys were. This guy, Mackie Craven, who was on our board at the time, he's since rolled off, and OpenView has, I think, decelerated their funds, and they're not raising another fund. Taught us so much just about how we could be,
And when did they come in? Was that Series C or
that was
C?
That was Series C. So date that around 2017, somewhere in there. And from then it was a very rapid succession. That onboarded money just started to accelerate a lot of different programs, different software engineering, and a lot of aggressive marketing tactics. And by this time, we still hadn't invested in a sales force. And by that, we had salespeople, but it was all to capture stuff coming inbound. When you really extrapolate what we did when we, into the Series D, E, and even F round, which was our final, most recent round, we didn't call it 50, 55 million in annual revenue. We still hadn't pivoted from product-led growth. Now we're well into, in 9 figures, and we're just activating that muscle motion. Actually, not just, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we hired the right folks to come in and build out that GTM, that go-to-market engine that supplements product-led growth.
So you said 9 figures. Tell us how big of a company you are now.
Well, it is a privately held company.
Yes.
So let's just say we've stepped through the 9-figure barrier last year, and we're now in that comfortably good double-digit growth. So
with customers all over the world.
50% of the revenue comes outside the US. Mm-hmm. So again, showing most enterprise software companies start here, leverage their networks, and then they have to go figure out the ROTW, the rest of the world. We're, basically 50-50 from day one, and we've elevated that way. We'd love to see 70-30. We think there's a lot of potential in Indonesia, India, places where they're minting unicorns. And guess what? Aggressive, beautiful, world-changing software is being built outside of our borders. So it's you better be there first.
Yeah, I'm one of the companies I'm an investor in with a pretty passive role. I'm an observer on the board, but I would say there's active observers, there's passive. This is definitely passive, and they're a product-led company. Probably the most meaningful investor on the board, is so anxious about them kind of building out their sales force. And, he helps them with the math. If you have X number of salespeople and they got quotas of Y and they make X percent of their quota, and, you double the sales force and then you double again. And yet all of the data on the go-to-market side is that it's the marketing leads, the incoming leads that convert into new revenue. It's all kind of the campaigns that they're running are very effective. And these are kind of, big brand name customers who sort of find them through kind of their guerrilla marketing online presence. That gets turned over to the salespeople, a relatively small group, and almost every sale they get follows that. And, I keep trying to nudge them a little bit to say, follow the data. The data is saying that if you need to do anything, have a discussion about how you double, triple, quadruple that already successful effort of bringing very warm leads in that get converted into your next customers. And maybe the quantity of salespeople matters a lot less than just building upon where you're already having expertise. But,
there's, I remember Brad Feld. This is why he's sort of like, the person he is. I remember in one of maybe the first board meeting, maybe it was like, this is like after they wrote their Series A check or something like that. And, we're going through all the product-led growth. Maybe it was right before the Series B or C. Doesn't matter. It's early. And he's like, this is great. You guys, I can see the efficiencies. Like you're killing it, but you're going to get to a point where you have to stop the push-oriented marketing, which is programmatic product-led growth, into a pull-oriented. You need to go tap the logos you want and bring them into your engine. Mm-hmm. He predicted this, as Brad would. And, our business is probably not dissimilar to a lot of other businesses, but, you have to really examine things like there will come a point where you're maximizing TAM in some cases, not all cases. The velocity, will start to peter out, right? And it's sort of, the analogy is you can only twist the throttle on a motorcycle so far before you have to examine, like, how can I go faster? Mm-hmm. Right? So part of that is compressing time. Time compression is a function of, finding the logos you want and bringing them in and not waiting for them, right? So if you really understand, deal cycles, you can base this upon, those that found you. And so there's an intrinsic motivation for them to come and explore you. They found you for a reason. So you have to bring the others that haven't necessarily been looking, shrink that time, demonstrate the value, and get them into the flow. Like that is a work of art. And, we're still going through those machinations. Mm-hmm. That and deeper versions of global expansion. Like if you really want to be a global company, product-led growth can get you only so far, So let's fast forward about 10, 12 years from now. And let's just assume, and I'm not saying this will happen or won't happen, but let's assume JumpCloud goes public, gets sold, and you wind down your day-to-day involvement with JumpCloud somewhere well before that 10 to 12 years. Who are you 10 to 12 years from now? Like, who do you want to be in your professional life? What do you want to be like? Looking back and saying, wow, this last 10 years was phenomenal. Yeah.
What would that look like for you?
I think, thank you for asking that question. In my heart, I feel like, I want to be in a more professional grade version of mentor that I am now. Like, I don't know enough. Like I think, I got some gray hairs and I can help some lessons. More time working with entrepreneurs at, startup and scale up level. Really.
Mentor sounds like a non-financial relationship and a non-working. It sounds like a helpful relationship. Is that what you really mean, or you think about?
Well, it's a good question. I think, of course, there's some economics. I think where I was going with this is being a world-class independent board member, and I get to witness some of that in action. Like our board is bonkers. Like they're really exceptional, especially the independents. And Raj has created a master class in how to manage or architect a board. I kind of want to be that,
That would probably be a good kind of endeavor, lunch and learn, kind of ask me anything topic.
Yeah.
For you to be featured on is kind of, okay, let me tell you what a high functioning board feels like, looks like, high functioning board members. Because I think a lot of scale up executives,
they need it,
and they need it, and they're not sure that they know they need it until they maybe have kind of, because it can really work to your favor. And, a lot of times I think, I kind of found my right balance at some point. But I had to go through the whole, like, I want to show them I could do the job and I could be, the guy. And, there's some aspect of, that's important. But part of doing the job, being the guy, is leveraging the people and talent around you and building a structure around you that is, you're going to have to be accountable to them. It's a lot easier being accountable maybe to a bad board member than a good board member.
It's true.
But you get a lot more in exchange for that if it's a really good board member. And that really can help the company. You mentioned one investor who knew your space, looked at your data, helped you think through how to accelerate your growth strategy. I think, man, those kind of people around your board are worth their weight in gold. And I don't know that enough focus is put on that in this scale up stage companies.
Yeah.
Early on, you got your investors typically, and maybe someone who's friends with you. But when you're scaling up, you need that board to be working for you and with you.
I mean, it is, the masterclass, that I've witnessed Raj go through is really, a couple of things. One, there's, one sitting, financial investor on the board. The rest are independents. They're not all yes men and women. Like they absolutely challenge us but really make us critically think. And, and they do leverage their own very notable experiences. Some of these folks, anyone can go to jumpcloud.com and look at the board. But the number one thing to remember is we don't work for them. They work for the company and the outcome of the company, right?
That's a good way to think about it.
Right. Of course, Raj and I and our executive team can't be clowns, and we have to be, more than just, fiscally responsible. Like we've got to, there's a lot at stake here for everyone, right? But once you have that level of demonstration, there aren't children or clowns running the ship, right? Then you watch the dynamic happen. There's a trust relationship. They can really see what's going on. There's a lot of peer introspection between the board members, which is cool to see. What I mean by that is like, they begin to start to help us because they're challenging each other. It's hard you have to witness it, to really see, other than there's no silent voices, which I'm happy about. You don't have just some passive person twiddling their thumbs in the background, waiting for a payout. That is non-existent.
On your board, but on other boards, you definitely can be in that situation.
You absolutely can be.
In fact, I think I see that, more often than I see the opposite. And part of it is because the way maybe the managed team kind of thinks about the role of the board, they want them perhaps to be more passive. And, you can make it really easy for a board member to be passive. In fact,
that's right.
Even a board member who would like to be active can be made passive really quick if they don't think their time is being well spent. So, I think that's where it comes down to the management team's responsibility is to, say, the board. I love the way you said that. The board also should be working for the outcome of the company,
very
just
much
like
so.
we are. And they've got a vested interest in the outcome. On a personal level, they should be contributing toward the outcome.
I think so now at this point, we've had, a number of different board members come in, roll out, those kinds of things. The number one thing, and this is not just for board members, is interviewing tactics, like being able to ask the tough questions and not feel intimidated. Like this is your company, right? So yes, this board member may have, my God, accolades upon accolades and is well known to the industry. If you cave in and just, get, wowed by the resume factor, you're not doing your job. You have to put them to work, and they have to understand before coming in and taking that seat. We will be very aggressive about, I need this connection. I need this, I need you to review this paper, or, we are very active with our board, I guess is really the summation, but they have to meet us and be prepared. And the interview is a big, big part of that, right? Not being scared to just say, okay, here's what we need. Like, do you have the time for this? If not, high five, love you, but we're out, and those are real conversations.
Oh, that's interesting because I think most scale companies, have not reached that point. At least ones I've kind of seen.
I just need the help.
Yeah. Well, being a great leader is recognizing that, help can be helpful.
Yes, it can.
And if you don't open yourself up to that, you're not going to tap into it.
Right.
So, what else? Anything else that we haven't touched on that you were hoping we would get to?
Goodness, I feel like I'm all warm and cozy inside.
Yeah, we're a little.
This is very indulging. Just like, I feel a little weird. Like,
Oh, geez. I mean, this is a big reason I do this. Is one of the big chapters is Colorado Innovators, and so there's the purpose for those innovators is twofold. One is to inspire others, because people will learn from you and your journey and who you are and what you are, and that you care about the community. So don't feel like you're being indulged. Feel like you're being given a platform to kind of tell your story, but also I think celebrating the people who are doing really compelling, interesting things in our community, because celebrating them is part of what I think people need. They need and deserve and earned. And
thank you for that.
Yeah,
truly. And yeah, I mean this whole ecosystem we share here in little old 80304, or wherever in Boulder is like this. This is how it's been done. Like everyone would take a meeting, just to help out, from Brad Feld to anyone. That's what keeps my wife, my family, sticky here.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, that's what I love about this is all the really interesting, compelling people who are willing to kind of share their lives with one another. Love hanging out on Pearl Street, going to nice restaurants, and always run into some of those folks.
It's true.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to our future relationship around Endeavor, around the Colorado community, and other things that just pop up over time. I think someone's always coming up with an interesting idea on what to do next. And I think leaning into each other's ideas is a big thing we can do. So when you start to think about your future years, hopefully that could be helpful.
Dan, thank you. This has been wonderful. You're a great interviewer. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Cheers.
All right, man.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Bear Roars. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe on your listening platform. This podcast was produced by Loud Bear Productions and edited by Courtney Caruso with support from Kendall Weinberg, Emily Reed, and Gibson Siegert.